If stories of betrayal and unfaithful partners keep you hooked, welcome home. Show some love with a like and hit subscribe to join our community. Everyone said we were the perfect couple. Marcus and Elena, 7 years of marriage, a beautiful home in the Buckhead neighborhood of Atlanta, 2 cars in the driveway, dinner parties on Friday nights, and a vacation planned for our anniversary, a Caribbean cruise, 7 nights. Champagne, sunsets, and turquoise water, and the kind of photographs people post on the internet to make other people feel small. I believed in us. I believed in him. More than that, I had built my entire life around the architecture of that belief, and I had done it so carefully, so completely, that I couldn't tell where the belief ended and I began. I was the kind of wife who remembered every detail. His coffee, black, no sugar. His shirts, pressed, never folded. His mother's birthday, always a card, signed by both of us, mailed early, even though he never remembered the date on his own. I held all of it. I built our life like an architect builds a bridge, carefully, precisely, with the intention that it would last. What I didn't know is that while I was building, he was already planning the demolition. The cruise was his idea. He came home one evening in March, with a printed itinerary, and a smile I hadn't seen in months. He said he wanted to celebrate. 7 years together, 7 nights at sea. He said it like a poem. He had already upgraded our cabin without me asking, already arranged for champagne in the room on the first night, already researched the stops, Cozumel, Belize, Roatan. I remember thinking, this is him trying. This is him choosing us. I packed a white sundress that I had bought specifically for the trip. I packed good wine and sunscreen and the novel I had been meaning to read for 2 years. I packed hope, which is the heaviest thing and the easiest to lose. I should have packed my instincts instead. They had been trying to tell me something for months. I just wasn't ready to listen. The first 2 days were beautiful in the way that lies are beautiful. Smooth on the surface, warm in the light, hiding everything that moves beneath. Marcus was attentive from the moment we boarded. He took my bag without being asked. He found our cabin and opened the champagne and stood on the balcony with me watching the port of Miami disappear behind us. He was present in a way he hadn't been in a long time, and I made the mistake of thinking it was real. I made the mistake of thinking that presence and care were the same thing. They are not. Too attentive, I understand now. The kind of attention that comes from guilt, not love. The kind that is working overtime to compensate for something it can't name out loud. He held my hand at dinner. He suggested we watch the sunset from the upper deck every evening. He ordered my favorite dessert, crème brûlée, without me mentioning it. He laughed at things I said, and touched my shoulder when we walked and made me feel, for 2 whole days, like the most important person in the room. But his phone never left his hand. I noticed it on the second night. We were having dinner in the main dining room. White tablecloths and soft music and the ocean visible through the windows, dark and enormous, and somehow patient. He excused himself to take a call. 15 minutes passed, then 20. When he came back, something had changed in his posture. He sat down more carefully than he needed to. His jaw was set. "Work," he said, before I could ask. I nodded. I smiled. I cut my fish into smaller pieces and said nothing. But something had shifted inside me. A small, cold feeling. The kind you ignore because you love someone and you want to be wrong. That night, he fell asleep quickly. Too quickly. And I lay there in the dark cabin listening to the engine of the ship, feeling the slow rock of the ocean. And I thought, something is wrong. It was the 3rd night when everything changed. The 3rd night, and then nothing was ever the same again. Not me, not my understanding of my life, not my understanding of the man sleeping 4 feet away from me. Marcus had gone to the ship's casino after dinner. He had invited me with that easy, practiced smile, and I had said I was tired, and I had watched him leave, and I had waited. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his jacket hanging on the back of the chair for a long time. I don't know exactly what made me cross the room and reach into the pocket. Maybe it was weeks of small silences that had accumulated into something I could no longer name. Maybe it was the locked phone screen that he tilted away from me without thinking. Maybe it was the way he laughed differently when certain messages came through. A private laugh, contained, one he didn't share. Inside the jacket pocket was a second phone, small, black, a device I had never seen and had no reason to know existed. My hands were steady when I picked it up. My heart was not. My heart was doing something I can only describe as bracing, the way you brace before impact, when you already know something is coming and the only choice left is how you absorb it. The phone wasn't locked. Her name was Renee. The conversation thread was long, longer than I expected, longer than I was prepared for. 11 months. The messages went back 11 months, which meant they had started in April of the previous year, which meant they had started 3 months after Marcus and I had attended his firm's holiday party together, where he had held my hand all evening and introduced me to his colleagues with his hand at the small of my back. 11 months of messages, photographs, plans made in careful, deliberate language, a hotel reservation, the Rosewood in Washington, D.C., for the week after our cruise ended, and a message from Marcus, sent 3 days before we boarded the ship, that I read once, and then read again, because I needed to be certain I was understanding it correctly. After this trip, everything changes. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I know it's right. I promise you. And her response, sent 6 minutes later, I've been waiting so long, Marcus. I love you. I can't wait to finally just be with you. I sat with the phone in my hand until the words stopped looking like words and started looking like the shape of a life I had not been told I was living. The ship moved beneath me. Somewhere above, music played. I thought of the white sundress I had bought for this trip, hanging in the closet behind me. I thought of 7 years. I thought of the insurance policy he had increased 6 months ago, quietly, without mentioning it. I had seen the paperwork in the filing cabinet by accident and asked him about it, and he had said it was just something he thought was smart to do, and I had believed him, and filed it away, and forgotten about it until this exact moment when it rose back up with a completely different meaning. When I heard Marcus's keycard in the door, I put the phone back exactly where I had found it. I crossed to the bed. I lay down. I closed my eyes. He moved through the room quietly, thinking I was asleep. I was already thinking about what came next. I didn't confront him that night. I waited. Waiting when you know something is one of the hardest things a person can do. It requires you to perform a version of yourself that no longer exists, to smile and ask about the excursion itinerary and behave as though the ground beneath you has not disappeared. I did it for 1 full day. I watched him. I cataloged every ease in his manner and understood that what I had been reading as happiness on this trip was not happiness at all. It was relief. He was a man who had made a decision and was living in the calm before the execution of it. The next morning, I asked him to walk with me to the upper deck before breakfast. He seemed pleased. He took my hand on the stairs, and that automatic gesture made something cold move through me. We stood at the railing. The ocean stretched in every direction, wide and deep and green-gray in the morning light, indifferent to everything that happened on its surface. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I kept my voice completely calm. "Who is Renee?" 4 seconds of silence. I counted them. To his credit, and I used that phrase with some bitterness, he didn't try to construct a lie. Some men would have. Some men would have performed confusion, and then anger, and then wounded innocence in rapid sequence. Marcus did none of that. His shoulders dropped. He turned toward the water, and he said, "Elena, I was going to tell you after the trip." "Tell me what, exactly?" He turned back to face me then. His expression was something I didn't have a word for at the time. "That I want a divorce." There it was. The sentence I had been circling for 12 hours. The thing I had known was there without letting myself know it. It landed cleanly, the way terrible things sometimes do when you've had enough time to prepare yourself without knowing you were preparing. "The insurance policy," I said. "The one you increased 6 months ago. The one that names you as the sole beneficiary." The change in his face was immediate and unmistakable. Whatever he had been expecting from this conversation, it wasn't that. His eyes narrowed just slightly, and he studied me with an attention that was different from anything I had seen from him in years. It was calculating. It was cold. "You've been busy," he said. "So have you," I answered. We stood there at the railing of that ship, 7 years of marriage between us, and I looked at this man I had loved and understood something I cannot fully describe even now, that I was in the presence of someone whose plan included my absence, and that whether or not he had ever said it aloud didn't change what it was. He didn't push me. He didn't threaten me. He stood at that railing and looked at me with a flatness in his eyes I had never seen before, and he said, "We'll figure it out when we get back." I heard those words. I heard what lived inside them. I decided standing there that I would not wait to find out how he intended to figure it out. What happened next took 2 hours and required a kind of silence I had never known I was capable of. I went back to the cabin while Marcus stayed on deck. I moved quickly and without hesitation, the way you move when fear has burned through everything else and left only clarity behind. I had no plan when I walked into that cabin. By the time I walked out, I had one. I took only what I needed. I had brought cash, my own, kept in a small envelope tucked inside my toiletry bag, a habit from years of solo travel that Marcus always called excessive. I took my personal phone. I took the backup ID that I carried in a separate wallet, something I had done since a trip to Europe years before where I had briefly lost my purse and spent 2 terrifying hours without identification. Marcus always teased me about that backup ID. He called it my paranoia card. I left my passport in the cabin safe. I left my white sundress on the bathroom floor. It had caught on the edge of the cabinet door 2 days earlier and torn slightly at the hem, and I had been meaning to check if it was repairable. Now I left it there, crumpled and torn, next to the open balcony door. I did not stage anything. I want to be precise about that. I didn't arrange the scene or calculate its effect. I simply left what I had and took what I needed and walked away from the rest. The ship was docked in Puerto Rico for an afternoon port stop. I walked off the gangway in the middle of the afternoon rush, surrounded by tourists with sunscreen and shopping bags, a hat pulled low over my face, and dark sunglasses on. I was just another passenger. No one looked twice. No one stopped me. I walked off a cruise ship and kept walking, and behind me the life I had built for 7 years continued on without me, carrying the shape of my absence like a wound that hadn't been noticed yet. I didn't look back. I learned later what the hours after my disappearance looked like. The search, the crew going cabin by cabin, the frantic timeline constructed from the last time anyone had seen me, the torn dress, the open balcony, the passport. The official report, filed within 48 hours, Elena Voss, passenger, presumed lost at sea following an accident on the 3rd night of the voyage. These things happen, the article said. The ocean is unpredictable. Marcus, according to the one article I found 6 weeks later in a public library in San Juan, was described as devastated. The reporter used that word twice in 4 paragraphs. I read it once. I closed the tab. I sat for a moment with my hands flat on the library table. I had seen his face at that railing. I knew what devastated looked like in that man's eyes. What I had seen was not it. What I had seen was the face of someone who had just been handed something he needed. Survival has a way of teaching you things about yourself that comfort never could. The woman who walked off that ship in Puerto Rico was not the woman who had boarded it a week before. That woman had been soft in specific ways, hopeful, trusting, organized around the needs and rhythms of another person. The woman who walked into the heat of San Juan's afternoon, carrying $80 in cash and a backup ID, was already someone else. Harder in some places, quieter in others, more awake to the exact dimensions of reality than she had ever been permitted to be. I spent the first 6 months in Puerto Rico. I found a cash job at a small family-run hotel near the coast, doing laundry and housekeeping and whatever else needed doing. I learned to operate without a trail. I learned Spanish with the focused desperation of someone who needs a language the way other people need air. I learned that invisibility is not the same as disappearance. You are still present, still moving through the world, still accumulating small moments that belong to you. You are simply no longer visible to the people who expected to see you. Then I moved. Miami for 3 months, then Charlotte, then back to Florida. I kept moving because stillness felt dangerous, and because I had not yet decided what I was moving toward, but I was watching. From whatever city I was in, using devices that couldn't be traced to any name I had used before, I watched Marcus rebuild. The insurance claim was filed 79 days after my disappearance. I noted the number. The policy had a 90-day waiting period for presumed death without a body. He had waited until the last possible responsible moment. Not too fast, not patient enough to seem unbothered. $400,000, dispersed to Marcus Voss of Atlanta, Georgia, in connection with the presumed death of Elena Voss. He sold our Atlanta home 8 months after my disappearance. Within a year, he and Renee were photographed together at a charity event. The caption identified them as a couple. Within 2 years, there was an engagement announcement in a lifestyle column, with a photograph of them at dinner somewhere with candles on the table, and the easy body language of people who have been sharing a life for a while. He looked happy. She looked happy. They looked like people who had no reason to look over their shoulders. That was their first mistake. I spent those 7 years doing something more constructive than grieving. I collected. Carefully, quietly, I gathered every thread I could reach. Financial transfer records from our joint accounts in the weeks before the cruise. Marcus had moved money piece by piece into a private account, and while each transfer seemed routine, Together they formed a pattern. The insurance timeline, with full timestamps, the hotel reservation he and Renee had made for the week after our trip, and a former colleague willing to put something in writing. A phone call from Marcus, 5 days before we sailed, in which Marcus had spoken about wanting to start fresh without complications. Complications. That was the word he had used, apparently. I built a file. I added to it over years. I organized it until it was precise and undeniable, and then I chose my moment. Miami in July sits on you. The heat is not just temperature. It's presence, weight, the air itself pressing close in a way that makes you understand why people here move slowly and speak quietly and keep their windows dark. I had been in position for 3 weeks before I made my move. I had studied Marcus's schedule, his firm's annual conference in Miami, the same hotel for 4 years running, the same Tuesday-Thursday coffee shop 2 blocks south of the conference center. Creatures of habit are easier to find than they know. I chose a Thursday morning. I dressed with no drama whatsoever. Dark jeans, a white linen blouse, good shoes. I wore sunglasses when I left the hotel and removed them a block away from the coffee shop so that when he saw me, he would see my face fully and immediately, without question or ambiguity. I sat at an outdoor table near the entrance and ordered a black coffee and put my bag on the chair beside me and waited. He arrived at 8:47. He was walking with his phone out, scrolling something, and he was laughing quietly at whatever it was. A real laugh, loose and easy, the laugh of a man with nothing on his mind. He looked healthy, well-rested, comfortable in his skin in a way that told me the years had been kind to him, and I felt something clarify in my chest that I can only describe as resolve made solid. He didn't see me until he was 6 feet away. Then he looked up from his phone at the last second, the way people do when their body registers a presence before their mind catches up, and he stopped. The laugh died so completely and so quickly that it seemed like something mechanical had been switched off. I watched his face move through confusion, a fraction of a second, and then recognition, which took longer than I expected, because 7 years is a long time and grief can change a face, and I had changed mine deliberately. And then, after recognition, came the thing I had spent 7 years waiting to see on that specific face: fear. Real, unmanaged, cold fear. The kind that doesn't perform itself, the kind that simply arrives, uncalled and unwelcome, and takes up all the available space. He stood there, and the whole morning continued around us. The espresso machine working inside the coffee shop, a man on a bicycle, a woman laughing on the phone at the next table, and between us there was a silence so complete it had texture. I looked at him without moving. "Hello, Marcus," I said. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I reached into my bag and placed an envelope on the table in front of me. "Sit down," I said. "We need to talk." He sat. I had run through the possibilities, that he would run, deny, pull out his phone. Instead, he sat across from me like a man arriving at an appointment he had been dreading for 7 years and had finally run out of road. Instead, he sat down across from me like a man arriving at an appointment he had been dreading for 7 years, and he folded his hands on the table, and he looked at me with those frightened, calculating eyes, and he said nothing at first. "You're supposed to be dead," he finally said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I know," I said. "That was the plan, wasn't it?" "I never," he started, then stopped. "Don't." I said it quietly, with no particular heat, and something in the flatness of my tone closed his mouth more effectively than volume would have. "I'm not here to argue about intent. I've spent 7 years past the point where your intentions interest me. I'm here because of what you did do, and I have everything." I slid the envelope toward him across the table. He looked at it. He didn't touch it. "Inside that envelope," I said, "are copies of the financial transfers you made in the 6 weeks before our cruise. Money moved from our joint accounts into a private account in your name only. You'll find the insurance claim timeline, filed on day 79, 3 days before the 90-day minimum expired. You'll find the hotel reservation for you and Renee at the Rosewood for the week after our trip. You'll find a printed copy of the message you sent her 3 days before we boarded, telling her everything would change after the trip." I paused. "And you'll find a signed, notarized statement from David Harmon, who received a phone call from you 5 days before our cruise in which you told him you were planning to start fresh, and that you needed to handle some complications first." A small sound came from Marcus. Not quite a word. "David talked," he said. "David has a daughter my age," I said. "It turns out that mattered to him eventually." He sat very still. Outside, a bus passed. The woman at the next table finished her call and began reading something on her phone. "What do you want?" Marcus said. "Two things," I said. "First, you will contact your attorney this week and begin the formal process of returning the insurance funds in full, with a written statement to the insurance company acknowledging that the claim was filed under false pretenses. Your attorneys can negotiate the specific language. Second, you will sign a document, which my attorney has already drafted and is ready to file, in which you acknowledge that you had reason to believe I left that ship alive and made no effort to report that possibility to authorities." "That's a confession of fraud," he said. "The insurance portion, yes. The second item is a factual acknowledgement. Your attorney can advise you on the difference. And if I refuse?" I picked up my coffee. I drank from it slowly. I set it down. "Then the complete package, the transfers, the timeline, the reservation, the messages, and David's statement, goes simultaneously to the FBI field office in Atlanta, the Fraud Investigation Division of Meridian Insurance, and 3 journalists, 2 of whom have already expressed significant interest in the outline of this story." I paused again. "You have 24 hours to contact your attorney. My attorney will be expecting their call." I stood up. I put the strap of my bag over my shoulder. "Don't follow me," I said, "and leave Renee out of this. Whatever she knew or didn't know, this conversation is between you and me." I walked away from the table and did not look back. My hands at my sides were completely steady. I spent that night in a hotel room on the 12th floor, 12 blocks from where I had left Marcus sitting at that outdoor table with an envelope he had not touched. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the city below, the lights, the traffic, the ordinary movement of people through their ordinary Thursday evening, and I let myself feel everything I had been managing at a controlled distance for 7 years. The grief came first. It always does, I think, when you finally stop running from it. Grief for the marriage I had believed in. Grief for the woman I had been before the 3rd night of that cruise. The woman who had packed a white sundress and pressed her husband's shirts and believed that care and attention were a kind of protection. She was not naive. She was not foolish. She was simply someone who had given everything she had to something that was not what it appeared to be, and that deserves grief, not shame. I let myself feel the loneliness of those first months in Puerto Rico, the particular quiet of a person who has removed themselves so completely from their own life that the silence is almost physical. I let myself feel the slow, strange discipline of 7 years of invisibility. The way you learn to exist in the margins of things. The way you learn that you are more than the life that was built around you. Then I made myself a cup of tea from the small hotel kettle, and I sat back down by the window, and I waited. At 6:14 the following morning, my phone rang. It was my attorney. She told me that Marcus's legal team had reached out at 11 the previous night, that they wanted to discuss terms, that their client was prepared to cooperate. I closed my eyes. Outside the window, Miami was already awake and moving, already hot and bright, already full of people going toward their days, without the slightest awareness that 11 floors above them, a woman who had spent 7 years being dead, was standing in the morning light, with her hand pressed flat against the glass, feeling something she had not permitted herself to feel in a very long time, something that felt, cautiously and quietly, like the beginning of being free. The legal process took 4 months. Marcus returned the full insurance disbursement, $400,000, plus accumulated interest and a penalty assessment. He signed the acknowledgement document. His attorneys worked to keep the matter from open criminal prosecution, and I agreed to that outcome, because criminal proceedings were never what I was after. What I was after was simple, the truth on record, and my name restored to the state of existing. On a Tuesday morning in November, a judge in Miami-Dade County signed the paperwork that formally voided the presumed death declaration. Elena Voss, not deceased, not lost at sea, present, documented, accounted for. I walked out of the courthouse into thin winter sunlight with a folder of documents in my hand. No ceremony, no crowd, just a sidewalk and the sound of traffic and the warmth of the sun on my face, and the quiet knowledge of what those pages said. She was here. She had always been here. Renee and Marcus separated 6 weeks after our meeting in Miami. I don't take credit for that. What a person is capable of doing to one person doesn't change because the target changes. She would have figured that out in time. I moved to a small apartment in Coconut Grove near the water. I rebuilt slowly. I called my sister, the only person who had never fully accepted my death, and told her everything. She cried for a long time. Then she flew down. We sat on my balcony and watched the water and didn't say much. Some things take time to be spoken aloud, and we both understood that. People ask sometimes whether I regret the choice I made on that ship, whether I wish I had stayed and fought from the beginning. I've asked myself the same question. Here is what I know. That night, facing a man who had been planning to discard me and a policy designed to make it profitable, I made the only choice that felt safe. I chose to survive on my own terms, to gather, to build, to wait until I was ready, rather than react in a moment of pain and exposure. I chose to be the author of my own ending. The ocean outside my window is the same ocean that carried me away from that life 7 years ago. Wide and indifferent. It doesn't remember me. It doesn't owe me anything. But I am not the woman who stood at that railing waiting to find out what someone else intended for her. I know what I survived. I know what I built from the ruins of it. One document at a time, in 7 years of silence. I know who I am, and I am no one's ghost. If stories of betrayal and unfaithful partners keep you hooked, welcome home. Show some love with a like, and hit subscribe to join our community.